Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. Usually, in this podcast, we explore and we dissect the evolution and the history of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one at a time. Now, we've already done 4 complete seasons of the podcast. We looked at the evolution of the slasher movie, the evolution of the ghost story, the evolution of folk horror, and earlier this year we finished our 23-episode journey through the evolution of the zombie movie. Later on this year, around Halloween time, we will begin our new series on the evolution of the occult in film. Very, very exciting. So right now we're in a kind of summer break, but this is a very special one-off bonus episode in which me and my co-host Adam Robinson are going to be discussing all things Frightfest. Last week, me and Adam and a whole bunch of other podcast listeners and contributors attended Frightfest, one of the biggest horror festivals in the world. 5 solid days of horror movies, pretty much playing back-to-back all day, every day across that weekend. So we wanted to take this opportunity to run down some of our favourites, some of our festival highlights. So Adam and I will be counting down our top 5 picks from Frightfest 2019. Now, all of these recommendations and all of these discussions will be completely spoiler-free. So don't worry, I know there's a lot of people out there who didn't attend Frightfest who might still want to listen to this, who haven't seen the movies. Don't worry, we don't spoil anything. These will be very brief recommendations. There'll be movies that you can hopefully look out for in the future when they're released in cinemas or on streaming platforms or wherever. So, get a pen and paper at the ready, note down some of these titles, because trust me, there are some absolute gems in here that you are not going to want to miss if you're a horror fan. Not only that, I've also put the word out to other Frightfest attendees, and I asked them to send in little voice messages in which they can discuss their picks, their favourite movies of Frightfest 2019. So as well as me and Adam, you'll also be hearing from other Frightfesters about their personal highlights at this year's festival. We've got absolutely loads to cover, so let's dive straight in. Adam Robinson, he's been on the podcast a whole bunch of times before. He was last here discussing Pontypool, and before that he was discussing The League of Gentlemen, and in fact he was here to discuss Frightfest with me last year. He's an actor, he's a writer, he's currently writing a brand new horror show in which he reads and performs live ghost stories on stage. Very, very exciting. I cannot wait to see it. He sat down with me and we ran down our top picks of Frightfest 2019. Here we go. Welcome back, Adam Robinson. Hello.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be back.
So good to have you here. It's been a year. This time last year, we were here talking about Frightfest 2018.
We were. It was my first appearance on the podcast.
It was. In fact, the first time we met properly was Frightfest, wasn't it?
First time we ever met. Yeah, we'd had an email exchange, hadn't we? And then met at the festival, and then
and here we are again.
Here we are.
And that is the thing. I want to ask you just briefly about the festival, aside from the films, but just the festival in general and the atmosphere and everything, because I think that's what I found great this year and last year is you meet people like us.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and it's great for the people, right?
It is. Once again, it's my second ever Frightfest. Amazing people. The gaps between the films are at least as important as the films themselves. And once again, I met some really wonderful, lovely people. I got to hang out with some of the people that I met last year, and it's just great. I can't speak highly enough of the the social element of that festival. It's just incredible.
It's been absolutely amazing, hasn't it? And it does get to that point. I mean, I think the films have been really good this year, but it's the first time I've been tempted to kind of go, should I just skip the film and just sit in the pub with everyone, because I just love all the people. I just love chatting to people. But you've got to watch the films to then be able to talk about the films with people in the pub. That's the thing. So it's like, but there are times, weren't there? There was a time when we came out of a film and we were like, ordered drinks, and we were like, fuck, we've only got 5 minutes till the next one.
Exactly.
Like, really?
Yeah, I really timed it badly with like 2 fish bowls of gin and tonic, basically. And I had to hand one over to your capable hands. And
then people came over and I was just stood by myself with 2 giant fish bowls of gin. Just like, hi everyone.
Hi guys.
Just hanging out by myself with
ready
some gin.
To go. Yeah. And it was really nice to meet some listeners of the podcast as well. And They're just so lovely. Everybody I've met who is involved with this podcast or listens to this podcast is just a delight. They're so sweet and so welcoming.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
And smart. And it was really nice to meet a couple of people who'd sort of listened to the episodes that I'd done with you as well. And to get feedback on that was surreal and great.
It is surreal, right? I mean, we're going to hear from some of these people throughout the episode, but even somebody from Texas, and that's the weirdest thing, is that when you hear from people that aren't even just in our sort of London bubble, it's like, holy shit, that you forget sometimes that this podcast that we're recording right now will go out everywhere, all over the world, and you think, Jesus Christ.
Well, you used to get it all the time, I think, listening to, doing the podcast as regularly as you do, you must get a lot of comments and
I guess, and it never stops being surreal. I can never imagine a world where I would just get used to it or expect it. Like, every time it is a shock. It happened, didn't it, when we went and sat, we happened to be 2 seats away from each other in one screening at Frightfest in the Prince Charles Cinema, and the guy sat in between us suddenly went, I recognise these voices. And, and it was just, it's so nice to bump into people and speak to people, and people wearing their Evolution of Horror t-shirts around.
I kept spotting them, and I kept wanting to run to you and go, seen another person wearing a t-shirt. It must be lovely for you as well. It must be great.
It's amazing, but it's I mean, what the thing is about this podcast is that it's not just me. I mean, it is just such an amazing group of people, and that's what's so lovely about it. And it's great. It's great getting to hang out with this group of people.
It's proper community, isn't it?
It is. It's lovely. So anyway, I don't want to sound like I'm just like kissing my own bottom. So
no,
I'm
that's
all right.
Now. That's all right.
But let's talk about the films overall. Now, we're going to count down our top 5. Although they're kind of our top 5. We were aware of each other's lists, and we didn't want to double up, did we? So it's kind of like a joint top 10 almost,
exactly.
But overall, this is your second year at Frightfest. How did you find the quality overall compared to last year?
Well, I had a much harder time compiling a top 5.
Right.
Way harder, and not because I couldn't find 5. Quite the opposite.
Yes.
It was really, really tricky. In fact, I would say the majority of my top 5, except for the number 1, are all equal pegging.
Totally.
Right? It was really hard to rank them. But there were just so many to choose from this time. I felt the quality this year was way better. I enjoyed. For me, there were far more hits this year than misses.
Me too. There was, last year I think I had a couple of scenarios where I had movies like Gaspar Noé's Climax, which I loved so much more than anything else. And I don't think I had that this year, where I had one standout film that was that much better than all the others. And yet at the same time, I didn't have any that were really, really awful either. There were a couple of, they're never all gems, but even the worst this year didn't come close to the worst of last year.
I would agree.
So maybe we were just lucky with the films we chose to see or something, but it's been an incredible batting average this year.
Definitely.
I would say.
And it's worth bearing in mind as well that you see 24 films, something in that area over 5 days.
Yeah.
And so, films that are in inverted commas bad, or films that you didn't like as much as other films, it's usually in comparison to films that you love. Well, for my own part, films I love.
Totally, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get into the top 5 in a minute, but first of all, I want to ask you about a film. I'm going to ask you in a minute about a film that neither of us have got on our lists, but certainly for me, it's like an honourable mention. I wanted to take this opportunity to play a quick snippet of a chat I had with the Soska sisters, and they were it was the world premiere of their new movie Rabid, the remake of David Cronenberg. So I'm going to ask you your brief thoughts on what you thought of that, because it seems to have divided people quite a lot, this movie. But first of all, I'm going to play you a little snippet of the interview, and then we'll chat about it. Soska sisters, welcome. Hello.
This is Sylvia. Hello. Thanks for having us.
Sylvia, and hello, Jen.
This is Jen. Thank you for having us, and thank you for the lovely ice cream colored mics.
I know, they're nice, aren't they? They're very sexy mics. Yeah. Was there stuff that you were trying to sort of say with this movie in terms of, obviously it's about the fashion industry, but I wondered whether there was anything that's reflected your experiences in the film industry and female identity and sexual politics and all of that kind of thing going on in this movie?
And everything with the Time's Up, Me Too of it just being like a fashion accessory really annoyed me, especially they wear black one year and the next year they're worshipping Bryan Singer, who's like a very well-known rapist. Yeah, the original was about like the STD crisis and the AIDS epidemic, but right now the disease and the outbreak that's happening right now is the war that's happening on our minds, and many of us aren't even aware that it's happening. In North America, you can see it far worse than here. I've only been in Europe a few days and I'm like, oh, thank God. It doesn't seem that people are as angry or charged up. In America, you pick one of two sides and then you just hate
beat the other. People are so angry at each other for no reason. They don't know anything beyond the headline, but they're ready to kill someone because they think they're a Nazi.
This is Sylvia. So yeah, it's Nazis versus commies over there. But it's the people on top telling everybody on the bottom that the other guy, poor guy on the bottom, is your enemy. It's just ridiculous. But we do live in a rabid society. People are completely crazy and mean to each other, and it doesn't seem to be getting better.
I just wanted to play you that little snippet because I think that's quite interesting, because I think what the Soska sisters have done with Rabid is they've made it a 2019 post Time's Up, post Me Too. I thought that was interesting. They said, the original was about AIDS epidemic. This new one is about just general kind of war with each other, I suppose. Yeah. And we live in a rabid society. I thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, what did you think of the film? Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it. I as you said, it seemed to really divide people. It wasn't my favourite film of the whole festival, but not everything can be.
No, of course.
It was so nearly in my top 5 for this conversation.
Same.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was gross when it needed to be gross. I thought it was pretty bold. Some of those political statements were really clear.
Yeah.
But also I felt that if you didn't want that those messages to be at the forefront of the experience of watching it, you could have just seen this body horror picture.
Exactly. I think that's what's really nice about it, and it kind of worked for me on both those levels. A lot of people seem to really hate it, actually, which I found really interesting, and I don't quite know what. I get that, like for both of us, for example, like you said, it's not in our top 5s.
No.
It came close. It was still a really great film, and actually, you can listen to the entire interview with the Soska sisters on the Patreon channel, but I sort of said to them, I don't think Rabid is the best and most beloved Cronenberg movie out of those early ones, and I think in some ways, if you're going to remake any of them, that one could have done with a remake.
Well,
so
I've never seen it.
Right,
I've never seen the original.
Well, it's not his best, to be honest. It's really not, and it almost feels sacrilege to say something like that about a David Cronenberg film, but I think it's true. I dare say I think this one might have been more interesting than the original. So I really liked it, and I think those two were brilliant as well. They were. We saw them around the whole weekend.
There was such a presence, such a presence at Frightfest, and I loved it. And they were so friendly, and nice to everyone, and really eagerly seemed to want to meet everybody.
Yes,
and kind of I think made a good job of doing that at the end of the festival, sort of saying hello to people. And I thought that was really, really lovely.
Absolutely, I thought that was another a thing to kick off our chat with, because I think as part of that Frightfest atmosphere, you get the filmmakers just hanging out with everyone for the whole weekend and watching up the other films and getting involved and being in the audience with us, don't they? So that kind of sums up what the atmosphere is like.
Totally.
In a way.
It sort of removes that hierarchy somehow, and after a 5-minute conversation with a director of one of the films that's on, you almost forget like how impressive they are. I suppose.
Absolutely,
or a reminder of how impressive they are. But I really liked it, and I think having listened to that little snippet there, I really want to see it again, because as I say, I think the political stuff was there. Yeah. But I want to go back and investigate more now, because it's their take was really fascinating just then.
And I think I said on the Patreon, like I don't think it succeeds in everything it's trying to do, but I kind of respect its ambition.
Yeah.
I'd rather a film try too much and fail on some things than a film that's just sort of ticking boxes or painting by numbers or whatever.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the weirdness of it as well.
Yeah,
like when
it's weird.
Yeah, totally weird. But not. Yeah, it was weird. But like I've seen way weirder films.
Yes.
Like, I was quite surprised about how linear the story was actually.
And it starts off kind of grounded, before it goes batshit. So I think it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to, at some point, hopefully it will get a big wide release, and I'm really intrigued to hear what everyone's thoughts are on it, because it definitely divided people just at Frightfest.
It seemed to. It really seemed to, and quite, as you say, quite significantly.
Yeah, and I think there is a little bit of people just going, don't remake my David Cronenberg movies. I'm sure there is a bit of that as well.
I get that.
We're all a bit guilty of that with films and directors we love. So,
we are.
But anyway, let's jump into our top 5. So first of all, Adam, I'm going to ask you, what is your number 5 pick?
Okay, my number 5 pick is Kindred Spirits.
Oh, I absolutely fucking loved this film. Yeah. Go ahead. What's Kindred Spirits about?
Okay, so it's directed by Lucky McKay, who directed The Woman and The Lost and Tales of Halloween, which Frightfest people, I'm sure, Frightfest attenders will be familiar with. It's a story of Chloe, who is a single mother who lives with her teenage daughter, Nicole. They have a distant relationship, and neither one is honest with the other and in particular about their current relationships. When Sadie, Chloe's younger sister, turns up out of the blue after a long time away, it seems like she might be a force for good for the family. But the facts of an incident from their shared past starts to come into violent focus, revealing Sadie's true nature and intentions.
Love it.
My little potted synopsis.
It's a lovely synopsis because actually it's the sort of film you don't want to reveal too much.
Absolutely.
It's a and I know this is something we talked about a lot. I think when we talk about thematic similarities this weekend between the films we saw, and I don't know whether this is just because of the nature of Frightfest where you don't know a lot about the films, but there were a lot of films that I think didn't show their hand as to what they were until at least the end of the first act, let's say. And there are some movies, this one in particular, I sat down for the first 30 minutes and I was like, I'm really enjoying this, but what is it? What is this going to be? Where is this going? And I loved that.
And in fact, and you said this to me quite early on, actually, that you made that really astute point. And so when I saw things like Critters, it was actually a real relief in some ways to see a film. It's like, I don't need to figure this out. Like, I know exactly what's going on. But you're quite right. Like, I think it does keep its cards close to its chest, this one. But it's a really tightly wound thriller. It's got horror notes. It's not an out and out horror necessarily.
No.
But it keeps you guessing all the way through.
Yes.
In that sort of, we even said, didn't we, single white female.
Single white female. Rob made a really interesting point because I said to him, it kind of feels like a little play almost. And he said it's got a very Othello feel.
Absolutely.
And again, not to spoil too much, but there is definitely an element of Iago in one of these characters.
Well, I've got Othello written down in my notes. Hand that rocked the cradle kind of thing as well.
Yes.
And also something that occurred to me later was a sort of talented Mr. Ripley.
Yes.
Particularly when things start to spiral out of control and you just see this person trying to clear up or manage the mess that they're making. I really, really enjoyed it. I don't. The good thing about Frightfest to a certain extent is that, well, for me, I don't read the synopses and I don't watch the trailers.
Yeah.
So when it was just instantly arresting and exciting and thrilling and weird, I was just in.
Yeah. And I think, thank God, as well.
Yeah. And Caitlin Stacey, who plays Sadie, I think that's right. She's absolutely astonishing.
Who I remember from Neighbours in the 1990s.
Yes, I remember you saying that.
She's an Australian actress, and she was Rachel Kinski in Neighbours. For any old Neighbours fans out there, I was like, I spent the first act of this movie going, where do I know you? Yeah. And yes, bloody Neighbours. Thora Birch, who again, it's been a while since I've seen her in anything. She's brilliant. Also, she seems to have been like cryogenically frozen since 1999. She looks exactly the same. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's all round. I think all the performances are really solid, really intriguing. I also think that all the characters are really believable.
Yes.
Without spoiling anything, let's say the central antagonist, it does turn slightly cartoonish, I guess, towards the end of the film. But I really believed them, and one of the reasons that it's in my top 5 is because regardless of where the story takes us and regardless of actually where we end up, I was invested in them and I cared about everybody.
Couldn't agree more. You said it's not maybe strictly speaking a horror movie, and yet it was one of the movies where I felt the most tense, just because of I was so invested in these characters and I was so invested in the antagonist not doing what they were setting out to do to the protagonist. I was like, oh my God, please, to the point where I was like rooting for the good guys so much that it was making me quite tense and uncomfortable in a brilliant way, So
it is that Shakespearean thing of it's very self-contained, but you have got these characters who it's the dramatic irony thing. We know exactly what's going on to a certain extent. We know where it's going, and you're desperate for them to not be harmed, but also there's something very charismatic about the villain.
Oh, totally,
very charismatic,
totally,
and you're won over.
Yeah, I love it. All of them are brilliantly charismatic to watch on screen.
And this to me as well has an element to it which I saw a lot in the films, and actually I think comes up quite a bit in my top 5, which is one of the themes that seemed to recur at Frightfest in the lineup was relationships between parents and their children, and also what those relationships are, what they mean, and what the parameters are. What does growing up mean as a millennial, as a Gen Z person? There's something about childhood in Arrested Development. Somehow, there's something about that Peter Pan thing of you know, being constantly being a child.
Yes, and also this kind of like, do we trust our parents or do we trust our children? Depending on who the story is they're telling it about. It's really interesting. Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
I wonder, you know, I'm always looking at things like trends and off the back of certain big releases, and you know, we saw a lot of films, actually even some in our top 5 that are very much kind of Get Out-esque, but I think a lot of these family ones are very much post-Hereditary. That's what they feel like, you know, films that are almost, before they're horror films, they are domestic family dramas, you know, and that must be a Hereditary thing, you know.
You'd think so. I wonder how it works, you know, these trends and things, and I wonder whether these are the films that are, optioned because they follow that same beat,
yes,
or whether they actually are reflecting something that's going on.
True, maybe it's just a coincidence. It's true, because of course some of these movies have probably been in development for absolutely years. So you're probably absolutely right.
But also, I think it might be a bit of both. I think you know, they are reflecting. There are lots of these scripts about because it's a you know, it's an issue that's on society's mind.
It makes for great horror. It really does make for great horror. Yeah, it's fantastic. Amazing, excellent choice. I very much concur with that choice. Before we go on to my top 5, we're gonna play a couple of quick voicemails from a couple of listeners who we met for the first time throughout the weekend.
Hi everyone, it's Matt Warlow from London here. So this year was my first ever Frightfest, and I just wanted to dip my toe in a little bit. So I just went for the one day, but what a great day it was. 2 highlights for me. Number 1, Dario Argento's Tenebrae, with an introduction from Argento himself. Man, does that guy know how to direct a scene where someone gets their arm chopped off. Secondly, Mutant Blast, 11:30 screening after drinking all day. What a perfect film for that. When something involves a giant lobster that speaks French and somebody getting their head punched clean off their shoulders, you know you're in for a ride. So 2 things that I learned from the day. 1, I need to go for more than one day. And secondly, I just need to spend more time in the pub with you, lovely lot, and talk to and meet more of you. I'm already counting down to next year. Thanks, Mike. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work.
Hi, I'm Gav. And I'm Joe, and this year we dipped our toes into the seas of Frightfest 2019 by attending on the Sunday. So a highlight for me had to be the fantastic Ready or Not, which was a good old-fashioned violent battle of good versus evil, and had everything ranging from your budget Margot Robbies to a huge amount of religious symbolism, as well as a bucket load of violence.
Yeah, I really love that too, especially the explosive ending. I was not expecting that. For me, though, Daniel Isn't Real really stood out. I enjoyed the Lovecraftian creatures, cosmic horror, and outstanding lead performances, especially that of the son of the Terminator. The imagery from this film really lingered with me for days.
Yeah, the low light of the festival, though, Joe, was the disappointing Witches in the Woods, which didn't really take place in the woods. Kind of took place in a clearing. And it really wasn't clear if there was witches or not by the end.
So true, Gav. I mean, however, it was a fantastic meeting with the Evolution of Horror crew in the bowels of the Phoenix, even if we weren't selected to sing the karaoke.
Can't wait for next year's Frightfest, mate. Cheers.
There you go. We heard from Matt Warlow there, and then Gav and Joe. I'd like to give Gav and Joe their own podcast, to be honest.
They need one. We met them, didn't we? At the karaoke party. They were so cool. They were really nice.
Brilliant. As was Matt, actually.
As was Matt.
These were all people we met for the first time. Well, Matt, I think, came along to the Blair Witch Project screening I introed as well. So I'd met him very briefly, but it was great to properly hang out with him at Frightfest.
Yeah, we got to hang out a bit at the Imperial, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was all lovely people.
Yeah,
right? And good choices there. Matt mentioned the Dario Argento. Obviously, we probably should have mentioned this, but neither of us went. But Dario Argento himself was actually at Frightfest. They screened Tenebrae on the big screen. He introduced it, and there was also a whole sort of Q&A session with Dario Argento that Alan Jones hosted as well. Now, I think me and you, we had this conversation. I remember where we are both, for our sins, not the biggest fans of his work, you know. And I remember you said something that I completely agree with, which was that I said, "Are you going to get a ticket for Dario Argento?" And you were like, "Someone would want it more than me."
Yeah.
And you're so right about that. And I think as much as I'd love to have gone just to see him, someone would have wanted it more than me as well. That's the thing.
I need somebody to help me with my Dario Argento education.
Yes, me too, to be honest.
I've seen some of his work.
Yeah.
I haven't seen nearly enough.
No.
I think, but yeah, totally agree. I think it was amazing that he was there.
And for some people, like one of the listeners of this podcast, Tom Cushing, who we spent a lot of time with, he is the biggest fan of Giallo and Dario Argento, and I think that absolutely made his year.
Yeah.
You know, getting to see him, meet him, they all got signed books and all of that kind of thing, and signed DVDs, and that's I can imagine if you are a fan of Argento as much as so many people are, that must have been fucking amazing.
Absolutely, a friend of mine, Ross, travelled down from Leeds
exactly
to see him, and I didn't even manage to connect with Ross the whole festival. I need to drop him a line actually. But he came down, as far as I know, specifically to see it. So it's an amazing thing. What an amazing thing to have.
Absolutely
this legend at Frightfest. It's great.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. And then Gav and Joe, as you mentioned, we met them at the karaoke night in the Phoenix, probably about midnight or 1 a.m. or something it was, and both amazing, awesome guys, weren't they? They came and hung out with us. None of us got to sing karaoke together, but never mind. It was nice to all hang out.
It was. This is it, you see, meeting new people through this podcast. It was great.
Yeah, and actually a couple of those movies I need to check out. Mutant Blast. A lot of people have really enjoyed Mutant Blast. I know Brad was a big fan. Neither of us got to see that one. So Ready or Not, I'm sure we're going to come on to, and then their other favourite, Daniel Isn't Real. That tees up nicely into my number 5 pick. So my number 5 is Daniel Isn't Real.
He's weak, he's lonely, and he's nothing without me.
It's difficult to know where to begin with Daniel Isn't Real. This was one of the most striking movies I saw at Fright Fest. So the plot synopsis, I'm going to read it according to IMDb. A troubled college freshman, Luke, suffers a violent family trauma and resurrects his childhood imaginary friend Daniel to help him cope. The thing I kept thinking with this is that it reminded me of Drop Dead Fred.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you just said that. I was just thinking Drop Dead Daniel.
It is literally a horror version of Drop Dead Fred, which, that's about... I mean, if that doesn't recommend the film to people, I don't know what does, but it is literally the story of this boy who resurrects his imaginary friend to help him through some sort of his adult problems going on in his life, essentially. But is this imaginary friend actually imaginary? Is he not? And are his intentions good, essentially? So you've got this movie that starts off about kind of psychological... Well, I guess it starts off seeming like it might be a movie about mental illness, but then it kind of goes into this kind of more body horror and cosmic horror. It's really striking from the opening sort of frame where it starts with this big kind of spiral and colourful, striking imagery. It's made by the producers of Mandy. I think that probably gives you an idea of it. It's got that kind of neon lit synthy soundtrack kind of vibe, and it was such a visual treat. All of the performances were great, and for a film that is quite out there and it is weird and it really goes into full blown crazy genre territory. Again, like you said with Kindred Spirits, I believed it. Like I bought into it from the start with these characters, and I was hooked in, and I was happy to go wherever that film took me. Yeah. And I know we've got more voice messages to come, but I think it was a lot of people's favourite of the whole weekend.
It was a really striking thing. The surreal elements to it, combined with the sort of realism of mental illness, was pretty. It had a huge impact when you watched it. Yeah, I love the design. I love the design. The house with all the papers everywhere was that's beautiful.
It just looked lush, and that, in the same way that movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street are able to take artistic, dreamlike license, they're able to go into kind of fantasy sequences, and they're able to just go all out. And there are practical effects, and there are monster designs, and like I said, there's body horror, cosmic horror. There's this really cool sequence involving a dollhouse. Like, it's just amazing, striking imagery, so that everything about it feels fun and intense and scary and engrossing. I was a little bit worried to begin with, because I thought, it's always tricky when you get a movie that is like, right, I'm going to tackle mental illness in a kind of genre way. Yeah. But actually, the way that the story goes, I was really glad. I won't say anything more.
I think it did something very interesting with it, and that was another theme at Fright Fest. It seemed to me that mental illness, mental health was quite prominent in a lot of these films, and I think by the time I got to Daniel Isn't Real, I'd already seen a good few of them. So, of course. But I think I really, I found it really engaging and really enjoyed it. Yeah. I think you're right about the Nightmare on Elm Street comparison as well. Yeah. I won't obviously reference the specifics, but later in the piece, there's something that really reminded me of that that atmosphere, really, of those dreamlike sequences. Yeah. And Doll's Houses, by the way, they were all over.
Interesting.
They were in Kindred Spirits as a Doll's
They
House.
were.
They-
Again, I don't want to bring up Hereditary again.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it was great. And I think of all of the movies at Fright Fest, it's going to be one of the ones in which the imagery stays with me. You know, as much as I loved Kindred Spirits, it's not going to be necessarily one where the visuals stay with me.
Totally.
And same with some of the others on my list. But this one, it's like I can close my eyes and see it still, and I think it's wonderful.
It was quite unapologetic as well in its.
It was.
In its, it had bold ideas and there was philosophy in there and art criticism and stuff like that. And I think actually I think it's quite bold to stick that stuff in and not spend too much time in the film unpicking it. I think it's
totally. It could have easily as well become a bit up its own arse or quite pretentious. But again, I think it stayed rooted in a kind of fun genre, place.
I would understand that criticism of it.
Yeah,
if somebody said that about it, I would understand that criticism of that film.
Absolutely.
I didn't find that.
Yep. No, me
but
neither.
I would understand why people might think.
Of
that,
course.
Hi guys, this is James Rodriguez from Trowbridge, and my favourite film of Fright Fest was Daniel Isn't Real. It's an engaging story about living with mental illness, stylishly realised into something that's downright twisted, otherworldly, and supremely horrifying. The best way I can describe it is if Fight Club was directed by Ben Wheatley, and I was so grateful to get the chance to see it at my first Fright Fest. But I was also grateful to just have the full-on experience, to meet all the lovely Evolution of Horror people, and to get a hug off the Soska sisters. And I'll definitely be returning again. Cheers.
Hi Mike, it's Tim Coleman here. I'm just getting in touch to say that my favourite film of Fright Fest 2019 was Daniel Isn't Real. This was the new film from Adam Egypt Mortimer. It's a really arresting piece of work, kind of takes in a very broad canvas from the kind of interior domestic space of the mental health of this young man through to almost like a cosmic canvas at other times, tackling like really weighty themes around like male identity, around mental health, but also around ideas to do with philosophy, theology, and this kind of blurring boundary between imaginary spaces and reality. Visually, it's really arresting. It was made by the producers of Mandy and has some similar kind of aesthetic touchstones to that, as well as recalling moments from films like Hellraiser and Hellbound, which are really fantastically realised on screen. And I'm looking forward to catching it again when it comes out on home entertainment, I think, at the beginning of next year. In terms of highlights of the festival, though, it probably wasn't so much the films as the people. It was just a real pleasure spending time with the Evolution Horror crowd, having great conversations and just hanging out, really. That was probably my highlight. All right, mate. Take care and speak soon. Bye.
Hi Mike, it's James from the Journey Through Sci-Fi podcast here. So this was my first year doing the full Fright Fest weekender, and I've got to say it was a bloody great experience. There was a really strong selection of horror films. It felt like every style of horror was being catered for at the festival, and I definitely saw some really great sci-fi horrors whilst I was there. Two of my favourites were Volition and Freaks. Definitely advise everyone to check those out if they get a chance. But my highlight of the festival was Daniel Isn't Real. So Daniel Isn't Real is equal parts psychological, body and cosmic horror. It's got elements of some of my favourite films. It's got bits of Jacob's Ladder in there, a little bit of Drop Dead Fred, and a little bit of Hellraiser as well. So I would say Daniel Wasn't Real is my highlight of the festival, and strongly suggest everyone to check that out if they get the chance.
Okay, let's move on to your number 4 pick.
So my number 4 is Knives and Skin.
Oh, another movie that really divided people.
It really did, didn't it? It really did. And more than any film on my list, I understand why this divided people. So it's about a teenage girl, a drum majorette called Carolyn Reeder, who goes missing in strange circumstances. And then effectively what plays out is the effect of her disappearance on the lives of her mother and her friends.
Yes.
And that is about the size of it in terms of the plot. It's a really simple premise, but I found it to be really layered and complicated, and I already want to watch it again.
Oh, right. So when I chatted to Paul McAvoy on this podcast, where he recommended some of his picks of the festival, and he said his favourite film of the whole festival is Knives and Skin, and a lot of people said that it's the best film at the festival.
Yeah.
Critic Anton Battelle, who had seen everything ahead of the festival, also said that was his pick of the best. And so I was quite surprised that so many... Brad Hansen, for example... he put it as the bottom of the entire festival, gave it 1 star.
Yeah.
I really liked it as well. I really liked it, but I can absolutely see, like you said, I can see why some people would go, "This is a load of pretentious old wank."
And if somebody, that's one for the poster.
I said this on the Patreon, but I came directly out of the screening, and somebody said to me, "Describe what you thought of that film in 10 words or less." And
Amazing.
I went, "Really fun, but a load of old wank."
Yeah,
and I kind of stand by that. You know?
I would see that film based on that endorsement. Though. I would be like, all right, cool. If somebody had described to me beat by beat what that film was like, what the atmosphere of the film was, I probably wouldn't have necessarily picked it because actually, and I was really surprised about how much I liked it. I was really surprised about how drawn in I was, and how it was really heightened, and it was really, in inverted commas, artistic.
Yes,
and it was more like at times watching a play.
Yes,
like watching, I don't know, Ibsen or something like that. It's set up in this, the first scene is this really stylized exchange between these two people, and you get these jarring interactions, and then you get this sort of mysticism which seems to come from nowhere and almost do nothing, except just be a visual, sort of an element of visual interest. But I was utterly hypnotized by it.
Yes,
I loved it.
I loved it as well. It's completely hypnotic. It starts off, I mean, the comparison so many people have made is that it's very David Lynch-like. And there is a danger, because, of course, so many people just go, let's make it David Lynch-like and make it a bit weird. And when it first started, I was like, is this just going to be too up its own arse? But it really hooked me in because actually they are really well-drawn, likeable characters. I think to begin with, you're struck by, like you said, the kind of weird, dreamlike, artistic, quote-unquote nature of it.
Yeah.
But actually, as you get hooked into each of these characters' lives and the stories, I realised I was completely engrossed by the end. And all of that other stuff on the surface of it had been stripped away from me, and it was just a film about characters that I cared about.
This is it. And I think you can either, I think with a film like that, once you realise that's the tone, you can either sort of push against it and go, this is ridiculous, which is totally fine.
You can choose not to go with it.
You can choose not to go with it, but if you do choose to go with it, I think it really reminded me of watching something at the theatre rather than the cinema.
Yeah, that's really interesting,
It felt like, nothing was quite real, but everything was really familiar.
Exactly. It was dreamlike from beginning to end. I also really thought of It Follows as well.
Yeah.
In the style of it, in the way that even It Follows, you don't really think that you're watching a real world at any point.
Absolutely.
And it's the same with this. And it isn't just style over substance. That's the thing, in my opinion. I think what starts off as establishing the style then slowly gives you the substance, I think, as it goes on.
And it was utterly beautiful. The use of music was beautiful. The a cappella singing, which, again, I understand why people might get irritated. I understand
loved
that.
it.
I get
There's
it.
an a cappella version of Blue Monday, which is my favourite bit of the film.
And when they start singing Girls Just Want to Have Fun, again, if somebody described that scene to me, I'd have been like, that sounds really rubbish. But I loved it, and I found it so charming. I found it really moving.
Yeah, agreed.
I come home in the morning light. My mother says, when you gonna live your life right? Oh, mother dear, we're not the fortunate ones, and girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun.
And again, there's this same issue of parents and children, and what it means to be a grown-up, what it means to be a child, and there's some really really bold images and scenes, I think, which kind of push at these boundaries of parents and children.
Yeah, agreed.
And each of the characters, it seemed to me really clear that each of these young women, it was really clear what they wanted, and they were either able to get that through their own actions and their own agency, or they were thwarted and there were problems in their way. I thought there was some awesome storytelling. Honestly, I've recommended this film more than anything I've seen.
I mean, and it's so funny, isn't it? Because it's not really a horror film at all, this one. I mean, we kind of talked about Kindred Spirits as kind of being on the cusp. But this movie, I don't think in any way sets out to frighten you.
Absolutely not.
But it's wonderful, it's striking, it's weird, and there's not much, I mean, as much as we've just been comparing it to other things, there's not really anything like it, which is what's really nice.
Did you find it? See, I came out feeling bizarrely uplifted by it.
Yeah.
which is
definitely
strange considering the nature of what's going on. But I felt quite uplifted and quite sort of energised somehow by it. You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I really loved it. As I mentioned, Brad Hanson, friend of the pod, was not a fan, but he sent us a little message to talk about his favourite of the festival. So let's hear from Brad.
Hi Mike, it's Brad Hanson here to let you know my favourite film of Frightfest 2019 is Josh Lobo's I Trap the Devil. The film is sort of an atmospheric chamber piece in which a couple reunite with their estranged brother, and he's got a fucking motorcycle making all the noise. Hi Mike, it's Brad Hanson here. My favourite film of Frightfest 2019 has to be Josh Lobo's I Trap the Devil. What Josh has done is created a really moody, atmospheric chamber piece that's sort of oppressive in nature. It's about a couple that go to visit an estranged brother, and when they meet him, he's like, guess what I've got in the motherfucking basement? The devil. From there, shit goes down. AJ Bowen stars in it, and he's really fucking great, as is the other two cast members. It's coming out on Frightfest Presents label on VOD through Signature Entertainment on the 21st of October. I really recommend you guys check it all out. It's fucking so good. And he's only 24, which means he's annoyingly talented.
I hate it when 24-year-olds make films as good as that. It's so annoying, isn't it? I Trap the Devil. Did you get a chance to watch I Trap the Devil?
I missed that one, and I'm devastated because I really wanted to see it.
That's one of the most painful things about Frightfest is that you are, every film you watch, there are two others going on at the same time that you're missing. So you're always going to miss out on certain movies. I loved I Trap the Devil as well, and the director, Josh Lobo, was so nice. He hung out with us a lot.
He did,
in the bar.
It's lovely.
He was absolutely awesome. It was also produced by Scott Weinberg, who does a lot in the horror community and the horror industry. It's great. Like Brad said, it's a lovely little Twilight Zone-esque chamber piece about a guy who locks someone up in his basement, and is he or isn't he the devil? And that's literally the setup,
Sounds right up my street.
It's great. It
sounds
really
like
good.
An Inside Number 9 episode.
That's exactly what it is. It's like one of those TV, and there is a very similar Twilight Zone episode that is that setup, but it's been adapted into a whole movie, and it's all set at Christmas, so it's got that kind of like ghostly Christmas, quiet but tense, creepy ghost sort of Christmas ghost story aesthetic as well.
This is so annoying. You're describing my ideal movie.
You're right. Well, as Brad mentioned there, it's actually going to get a release in October through Frightfest Presents, so do check it out. It's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to get on to my number 4, and actually I'm going to say what it is, and then I'm going to play some more voicemails because so many people had a lot of reactions to this movie. So my number 4 pick at Frightfest was Happy Face. There's a lot to say about this, but I want to play some other reactions first before we get into it. So here we go.
Hi Mike, Becky Dark here. Firstly, a huge thank you to you and the rest of the Evolution of Horror crew and all of the new people I met who were amazing. You all made Frightfest a complete joy this year, and it really was quite something. The best film I saw was Happy Face on one of the Discovery screens on Saturday night. I wouldn't necessarily call it a highlight. It affected me quite emotionally, but it was just a beautiful piece of art and not something at all that I was expecting to see at Frightfest. And yeah, in a weird way, I just completely loved it. It was definitely the best thing I saw, and I do recommend that people seek it out. Cool, that's it. Let's do it again next year.
Hello, I'm Katie Davis from Denton, Texas. Sorry, my voice is still off from the festival. This year was my first ever Fright Fest. I wouldn't even know about the existence of it if it wasn't for the Evolution of Horror and Mike. Thank you for everything. The festival was an absolute dream come true, and everyone was so wonderful. I met some amazing people and made loads of new friends. My favorite film by far was Happy Face. What an unexpected gem. Everyone should seek it out immediately once it's out. I can't wait to return next year and see everyone. Cheers.
Hi Mike, Steve Last here in London. Now, there were some really strong contenders for my favourite film at Frightfest this year, but I think the one that really clinched it for me, although technically not genre, was Happy Face. It was a really heart-wrenching film that took me by surprise, and I don't think there was anyone at that screening that it didn't affect in some way. As always, it was really great seeing you and the rest of the Evolution of Horror crew, and in particular, to be there to be able to celebrate the second birthday of the podcast with you. Thanks for everything you do. Looking forward to the occult season later in the year. Thanks a lot, mate. Take it easy.
Steve Last is one of those people that's so nice. he makes me feel like a bad person because he's so nice, isn't he?
He absolutely is.
In fact, everyone is. Everyone there that we heard from, and everyone we've heard from so far is so ridiculously nice.
How remiss of me not to say happy birthday as well. I don't know if this is the first episode. I don't know whether this is your first episode after the birthday.
True.
But,
it is. We celebrated the first ever episode of this podcast came out on Frightfest weekend in 2017. So yeah, technically the podcast birthday every year will always be end of August, Frightfest weekend. And Becky Dark, who you heard from just there, actually, and Brad organised a lovely cake for the second birthday of the podcast, and it was a horror-themed cake. It was wonderful. I love all those guys.
There's footage online.
There is footage online. You can find it on Twitter. I was shocked. I was kind of speechless. I was like, this is incredible. So we heard there from Becky and Katie. It was lovely to meet Katie, who'd come all the way from Texas as well. Absolutely amazing. Obviously, friend of the pod, Becky and Steve. They all loved Happy Face, and I think everyone had a similar reaction, which was like, knocked out by it, bowled over by it. It was not a film I was expecting to see at Frightfest. So essentially, the story is the story of essentially a support group. It's a CBT group of basically people with sort of facial disfigurements and them sort of finding each other and finding ways to deal with their place in society and the way people treat them and everything. And it's in some ways I thought, what is this doing at Frightfest?
Yeah.
But also, and in some ways it was hard to know where to place this on the list because it's so on another level to every other film I saw there.
Yeah.
It's like the sort of film that you would see in Oscar season. That's what it felt like to me. It was like this heartfelt, wonderful, important drama. But it was absolutely one of the best films I saw at the festival, if not one of the best films I've seen all year. It is absolutely incredible. Yeah, did you saw it?
Yeah,
with us,
it was on my. It was we've talked about our top fives. It was we were sharing this one. Well, we're sharing loads of them actually. We're sharing loads of these. But yes, it floored me. Absolutely floored me. This was one of the rare films at the festival that I'd actually seen. I don't think I saw the whole trailer, but I saw some of the trailer.
Right.
And I actually was a bit concerned about what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Based on the trailer.
Yeah.
But it was without ruining anything, it's a totally different thing to what I expected it to be, and it was beautiful and moving, and as I say, totally floored me.
Yeah.
And you could feel it in that room, in that really small screen. I felt quite privileged to be in that small screen, actually, somehow.
Everyone was. Yeah, you're right. It was a privilege. It felt like everyone was there together feeling the same thing. And I've never seen so many grown Frightfest men sobbing outside afterwards.
Loads of tears.
It's so sad. It's so moving, but it's beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful movie.
And it's character driven. And for me, each of the characters has something that they want. They have secrets that are uncovered as the thing goes on. It feels it's hard to put it into words. Isn't it?
It is. I think I don't want to say too much about it. I just think go and see it. Some point I'm sure it will get a release, and it is just do not miss it. It's really something. Yeah, and I should probably plug as well. I mean, Becky Dark, who you heard from there, she had a real reaction to the movie, and she's written a beautiful piece, a written piece on the blog section of the website. So you can go to the website evolutionofhorror.com and read it. It's wonderful, and it's a kind of review of the film, but it's also about her own personal experience and connection with that film, and it's really something, isn't it?
It's a beautiful piece of writing.
Yeah.
And so if you watch Happy Face,
and
have that poignant experience of seeing that, then go read Becky's blog post and have a similarly moving experience. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of writing.
Really incredible, and what a film. Stunning film. Again, like with Knives and Skin, in no way a horror film.
No.
It goes to show as well just how interestingly diverse the movies are at Frightfest, because it's not all films like Cruel or whatever.
No.
There's such an eclectic mix, which is what's great.
Well, I was worried that initially my top five had
no horror
films in it, which I don't think. I mean, it only matters in so much as this is the evolution of horror. Yeah, but in terms of Frightfest, I think you can actually go to Frightfest and see quite little horror.
Yeah, it's true. If you picked and chose the right ones, you could potentially not see a single horror film from beginning of the weekend.
Sci-fi. There's to a certain extent, I'm unsure why Happy Face was part of the festival. I'm so delighted that it was.
Yeah, me too.
But it's but yeah, as you say, and the good thing is nobody seemed to be like up in arms about the fact that there were these films that were doing something other than what you might expect from a horror film.
Totally. It's really nice sometimes to actually have a break from horror films to do things like that. Actually, another little shout out actually to a brilliant panel that Rosie Fletcher hosted, in which Charlie Albright and a whole bunch of other authors were on the panel about kind of books and adapting books to screen, really, wasn't it? And we both went to that, both loved it.
That was a highlight of the festival.
Yeah,
it was brilliant. It was really fascinating. It was, I said to Rosie afterwards that actually I'd happily sat there for another half an hour with those authors chatting to us. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, let's move on then. So that was my number 4 pick, Happy Face. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is The Wretched, which is directed by Brett Pierce and Drew T. Pierce. Do they go by the Pierce brothers?
Yeah, they call they actually call themselves the Pierce brothers in the credits. Yeah.
And this is a film about a student called Ben who goes to work on his father's marina for the summer. To take his mind off his parents' imminent breakup and his father's new relationship, Ben tries to fit in and make new friends, particularly with the witty and smart Mallory. Soon, Ben realises there's something strange happening with the next-door neighbours, who have started to deny the knowledge and existence of their young son. Along with Mallory, he starts to investigate, bringing him face-to-face with a 1,000-year-old horror.
Again, this is one that we've both had on our list initially. I think possibly of the whole weekend, this is the movie that just came completely out of nowhere for me and took me completely by surprise.
Almost didn't go see it.
No, we were, I think, the only two out of sort of our little group that went to see it, weren't we? And I'm so glad we did.
I'm delighted. It was it was a real surprise.
Yeah,
and I was sort of ready by that point. You get to certain points, don't you? And I think actually the Fright Fest schedule is quite clever in this way.
Yeah.
You get to a certain point, you think, this is what I really fancy a demon movie right now.
Yeah.
And quite often it'll be the next film you see.
You're right. Yeah.
I thought it began quite in a sort of formulaic way. I thought it was just going to be another sort of James Wan-esque kind of shock fest, creepy basement, witch-like creature, relatively obvious jump scare, runic symbols and all that stuff. But then it just became this really great character-led horror movie about a witch, but also about family again. It's fairy tale-esque and almost shared something with Guillermo del Toro.
Agreed. It had a Hansel and Gretel vibe to it.
It did.
I loved it. I think I spoke to the directors for Fright Fest TV, and there's an interview on YouTube with me talking to them. But there were obvious inspirations. I think they talked about Fright Night from the 80s,
awesome,
but obviously there's a kind of also a lot of folk horror about it as well, and it's got a really interesting vibe of this kid who maybe does a witch live next door to him or not, and I love things like that. But I think we both said, didn't we, when we came out of it, it's just the thing that you appreciate so much after you've seen a whole run of genre movies is that this one really took the time to build great characters.
It did. And as I was writing my notes to bring to the podcast, the thing that I was having more trouble remembering was the horror. And it's not to say that the horror isn't great, because it really is great. The creature design in this, I think, is unbelievable. It's so creepy, and some of the visual images are brilliant, and the scares are great, and
really
it's unexpected. But the story and the characters were the thing that really, really made it. The sound design was awesome.
Sound design was wonderful.
This sort of shrieking thing to emulate babies crying.
And again, just, to go back to the story, there is, and I don't want to spoil too much, but there are twists that, the early M. Night Shyamalan couldn't have done it better. I really, again, took me by surprise in a wonderful way,
I agree. I think that twists are only as good as the movie that they're in, because if you stick a twist and that rescues the film, and that happens so often, it seems to me, that I'm not that interested in that. But when a good twist comes and you're really surprised by it, as in this, it's for me, it's because of how good the story that's gone before
exactly is. And also that's it, because it's both being surprised by it, but then we're going, oh, of course that's the case. Of course. Why didn't I see that before? And I love that when twists do that to you.
And there's stuff about the difficulty of family again.
Yeah.
It's not too much of a leap to point out that this is a young man who's worried about his parents' relationship, and that one of the things that the witch figure seems to do is make parents forget about their children. It's quite thin. I guess it's quite thinly veiled as an allegory.
Yeah.
But it's brilliantly done.
So brilliantly realised. And you're right. That there is what I think I was most impressed by was that it manages to pull off a kind of slightly, like an 80s Spielberg feel. Like a boy who is bonding with his estranged dad after his parents' divorce, and there is definitely a kind of like, it's that Stranger Things. There's that 80s nostalgia of kids on bikes and teenagers, but also it's really scary as well.
Really scary.
And it doesn't pull any punches from like murdering children.
Absolutely.
And all of that kind of thing.
It's really bold in that. It breaks a lot. Should we say it breaks a lot of rules? I would say
exactly
that you're not expecting it to.
Yeah.
And the character of Mallory's awesome.
Yeah.
I really, really like that character. She's my favorite character in the thing.
Yeah, agreed.
And then there's the neighbor Sarah, who is just brilliant.
Yeah.
I actually thought she was going to play a bigger part in the movie actually, and also. I rewatched the trailer, knowing that I was doing this, and she's in the trailer quite prominently. But there's just brilliant characters who've got lots to do.
Yeah,
it seems to me there's very little sort of dead wood in it.
Exactly, that's what it is. For a short film, it balances a whole lot of characters, and you feel like and get all of them. It's just it's very clever.
It's brilliant.
Somehow economical but clever at the same time.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, loved it.
Agreed. It's a big highlight for me. That's The Wretched. So that's your number 3. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to take a quick pause and we're going to hear from Alex Ayling as he's going to introduce one of his highlights at the festival.
Hi, Mike. Alex Ayling here, friend of the podcast. Can I call myself a friend of the podcast? Okay, well, I just did. I came to Frightfest for the last day this year. It was the only day I could come. And so my top 5 is also my only 5. But I was really pleased to see that they hadn't forgotten to bring the fun. So 2 of the fun highlights that I had were Satanic Panic, which was a proper good romp, which didn't forget to take care of its characters and make sure that everyone had great motivations. And it also featured the most amazing Jerry O'Connell cameo. Hark back to Scream 2, everybody. And I also thought that watching the Banana Splits movie in the PCC was the perfect way to view it. And you were right about Here Comes Hell. Total fun fest. Of course, I'm sure everyone's going to say the best bit about Fright Fest was meeting all of the lovely Evolution of Horror family. See you again next year.
There you go, lovely Alex Ayling. So I thought that would be a good segue for me to introduce a very quick, I'm going to hear a little snippet of my chat with the director of Here Comes Hell, Jack McHenry. Now, another ridiculously talented, very young person. He directed this film when he was something like 19. And I won't talk too much about this film because me and Louise covered it quite heavily at the Glasgow Fright Fest. But the movie was so popular at Glasgow that they screened it again in London. And you got a chance to see Here Comes Hell, didn't you?
I did see it, yeah.
It's good fun, right?
It's really fun. Yeah, really fun. It throws everything at the screen.
Everything at you. And, what everyone keeps saying and what the director himself says, Agatha Christie meets Lucio Fulci, meets Blythe Spirit. It's all of those things. But, yeah, you can hear me and Louise talk about it in depth. But here is a little chat I had with director Jack McHenry. All right, welcome to the podcast, Jack McHenry. Hello, Jack.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries, thank you so much for being here. I saw your film Here Comes Hell at Glasgow Fright Fest this year, and I was a huge fan, probably my favourite film of the festival, so it's really great to chat to you. Thank you so much for being here. So, first of all, just for people who don't know, tell us a little bit about your film. What can people expect from Here Comes Hell?
Well, thank you for being so nice.
No worries.
It's a black and white 1930s style horror film, but with a twist. The tagline is Downton Abbey meets Evil Dead.
Amazing.
Expect kind of cocktails, dinner parties, and lots of kind of stiff upper lip English aesthetic. But then when things go wrong, they have to try and keep that reserve going, even though they're facing hell itself.
Love it. So good. So what kind of inspired you? What was the birth of this idea?
Yeah, it came from watching David Lean's version of Blythe Spirits, which, I mean, I love David Lean, and
it's a great film.
It's great, and especially the seance scene itself was the big inspiration.
Really reminded me of Blind Spirit.
Yeah, that was a massive jumping off spot. It was the idea of, I was just watching that and it was like, this scene is, even though the whole film is a comedy, this scene itself is quite scary. And it's almost as if, what happens, say, if maybe the film kind of went another way?
Right,
Similar to, say, something like From Dusk Till Dawn or things like that, where it's like two genres hit together, which I always liked. I like films where it's a surprise. The audience, like, you never know what the hell's going to come next, and that's really what we were trying to do.
Really cool. So how did you make it happen? It was Kickstarter, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it was a Kickstarter. So me and my girlfriend wrote the script, and our friend Olivia was the producer, who also are housemates. We all, and the composer as well. We all lived together.
Amazing.
And yeah, we wrote it, and we were like, okay, I guess the only way, no one's going to really give us money because we'd only made a couple of short films or things. And so we put on Kickstarter and made like a short promo, like a teaser-esque kind of show reel. And then that was the kind of the scariest thing for me, because it was because it was something like you put it out there and then you're like, you never know, like, because with Kickstarter, if you don't make,
people could just be like, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's so many films where you look at them and you're like, why the hell should I give you money? But it was really lucky that we just sent it out to everyone and anyone we knew.
It's awesome.
It was really nice. People got behind it, and we managed to raise nearly most of the budget on that.
That's incredible. That is incredible. And do you know, like, for anyone listening to this who maybe can't make it to Frightfest, any news yet on where this film might end up, or whether it will end up anywhere?
Yeah, I was told by Olivia that it has got distribution.
Amazing.
It'll be coming out in November, but I don't think I'm allowed to say
whereabouts.
But it'll be like
it'll be out there.
They'll be out there. So
nice.
If you can't make it, it'll be out. You'll be able to see it.
Awesome.
Cool.
There we go. Brilliant. Ridiculously talented, very young Jack McHenry. It's a great fun time, isn't it, at the cinema? Here Comes Hell.
It is, and you know me. I love ghost stories. I love M.R. James. It's got the haunted house. It's got a cameo from Robert Llewellyn from Crichton.
Incredible.
In a train.
And if you love your history of horror and evolution of horror, as of course we do, there are moments that will make you think of silent cinema, to moments that will go, oh, that's from Frankenstein, that's Universal. Now we're through to Fulci. Now we're on to Edgar Wright or Sam Raimi. It's wonderful. I love all of that about it.
Brilliant grasp of the Gothic. It's a really loving tribute, isn't it, to that stuff.
It is. It's wonderful. Okay, so anyway, that was Here Comes Hell, a great honourable mention from both of us. Now, my number 3 is the closing night film of the festival. This was the last film we saw of the whole thing, and it's called A Good Woman is Hard to Find.
Do you need money?
I'm fine.
No, get out! Stay. Who else is here?
It's just the three of us. I have 2 little kids who just lost their dad.
I don't know where to stash this.
I don't want any part of this. I don't.
Nobody knows I'm here. Nobody knows this is here. It's perfect. 5 days. I give you a cut, everyone's laughing.
I can't have drugs in the house.
Okay, so A Good Woman is Hard to Find. Again, a film that is very much on the cusp of horror. I mean, IMDb describes it as a crime thriller and not a horror at all. It's directed by Abner Pastel, and the plot synopsis is: a recently widowed young mother will go at any lengths to protect her children as she seeks the truth behind her husband's murder. It's all set in a council estate in Belfast, and it very much feels like a piece of kind of social realism. A lot of people made Ben Wheatley comparisons, the sort of the early Ben Wheatley movies like Down Terrace and the first half of Kill List, movies like that. But it's also nasty, and it is gritty, and it's very disturbing, and it is scary, but it also then goes into proper kind of revenge movie territory, I guess, right? And it does become a kind of fun revenge genre movie as it goes on. But it's just got one of the most stunning performances I've seen at the whole festival, if not all year, from Sarah Bolger, who plays Sarah, the character of Sarah in this movie. She, I mean, just carries this film from beginning to end. There's almost never a moment when she's not on screen, on camera. And it's an emotional film. It's gut-wrenching at times. There were moments in the first half where I thought, I don't know if I can sit and watch this. You know, like it really hit me hard.
It knows how far to go. I think that there were. I agree with you. There were points where I thought, I don't think I want to watch what's about to happen.
Me too.
But it deals with the subject matter so skillfully.
Yes.
Because I'm not the biggest fan of revenge films. I'm not the biggest fan, and so I was a bit nervous about whether it was going to be to my taste as it got going. I totally agree with everything you just said. It was astonishing. Her performance is astonishing,
stunning,
and it's terrifying. And actually, the moments of terror are often the real world stuff. That's what I found.
Oh my God. I mean, that's the thing. It's similar to what Becky discussed about Happy Face. There is this kind of, this is not safe genre thrills.
No.
This is like real life. I could see this happening.
Yep.
Scares, and that is the hardest thing for me to watch.
Yeah.
And I'm almost relieved in the second half when suddenly it becomes a more over-the-top genre film, and I almost breathed a sigh of relief. I thought, thank God I'm in safe territory again now, because it's so well directed and so well written and so well performed that at times I felt like I was watching real-life horrible stuff happen, and it's
a great
stunning.
Great comment on austerity. It's got that political element to it as well, which at once makes you feel dreadful and hopeless and really angry at the way things are. But then somehow it turns it around, doesn't it?
It does.
And although it doesn't make anything shiny and glossy by any means, you do end. I feel I ended in a good place.
Ended on a high. I mean, there were moments in the final act where all of the audience was cheering and clapping.
Absolutely,
because you were just this it was this absolute we've earned this. You know? Yeah. Absolutely loved it. It was
great.
I think just in terms of the sheer skill behind it, in terms of how well this movie was crafted and put together. And everyone involved in it, I think it's one of the best movies of the whole weekend.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful.
And Edward Hogg played the villain.
Yes,
and
a terrifying villain.
Terrifying villain. And I a few years ago I wrote a short film called The Split, which is nothing to do with Split.
Yes,
it's called The Split, and Edward Hogg was it's a monologue basically, and he's in that. So that exists online if people want to go have a look at it.
Love it.
And I've never met him.
Oh, really?
Really bizarrely, I handed the script to Ed Rigg, who's the director, who's a good friend of mine, and he made the film, and I wasn't there. So I really hoped he'd be at Frightfest.
Yeah,
so I could,
you could have told him.
I could have sort of said, "Oh, do you remember this film?"
Oh, that's brilliant. He was great.
He's great.
Like I said, everyone involved was fantastic. Really, really good. Tell you what it was, and I mean this in the best possible way. None of them felt like actors or film stars. They felt like you were watching real people, and that's what I loved about it.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, so that was my number 3 pick. A good woman is hard to find. Okay, all right, let's move on. What is your number 2 pick?
Okay, my number 2 is Freaks.
Oh, Freaks. Again, this is something that you can hear me and Louise Blaine briefly discussing in our Glasgow coverage. This, along with Here Comes Hell, they brought back by popular demand in London. What did you think of Freaks?
Oh, it was incredible. I quite understand why they brought it back. Amazing. I don't want to. It's one of these films that you don't want to give too much away.
No, I think be careful what you say.
I'm just going to give the IMDb blurb, which is: a young girl discovers a bizarre, threatening, and mysterious new world beyond her front door after she escapes her father's protective and paranoid control.
Oh,
that's the.
This film floored me when I saw it at Glasgow. It's stunning, isn't it?
It's stunning. It's really surprising. It's moving. It's engaging. It's funny. The central performance from Lexi, I think it's Lexi Kolker, I think is how you pronounce her name, is unbelievable.
Yes.
I think she was 8 or something, or 9 when it was filmed. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's one of those child performances where you think, how did you do this? How did you get this performance out of a child in a movie like this?
So convincing. One of the performances of the whole festival, I think. And I'm not just saying that for a child. No. Genuinely amazing.
100%. I don't know whether, and a lot of people have made this comparison, whether it's a coincidence that she looks a hell of a lot like Drew Barrymore, and there is a connection to Firestarter, Stephen King's Firestarter, which Drew Barrymore starred in as a child. But
did not even make that connection.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But she's stunning. I think
amazing.
She's going to be a star.
Yeah, totally. Or retire after this, because how do you do better? I'm sure
like Daniel Day-Lewis. That's it now.
I'm sure she will do better. I'm sure she'll continue to do amazing things. But it's amazing. It keeps you guessing.
Yes,
all the way through.
it does.
It kind of sets itself up. Again, I'm really going to avoid spoilers here, so don't worry if you haven't seen it. It sets itself up something close to a zombie apocalypse movie, it seems to me, at the beginning. Or
a movie like Room.
Movie like Room.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I think it actually... And it does share something with the Girl with All the Gifts in terms of its tone.
Definitely,
I would say.
definitely.
And then it really slowly unravels, and it moves into an area that I didn't expect it to go into, and characters who you think are one thing turn out to be perhaps something else, and there's lots of questions about people's motivations and things, and it's strange because it feels quite at times I totally believe in the world. I wouldn't say realistic, but it feels quite real within the realms of the world it's building.
Totally.
And then you've got these incredibly garish, bright images.
Yes. Almost like you're looking at a comic book film or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are moments of jeopardy involving Chloe, who's the girl, and a character called Mr. Snowcone.
Yes.
And you daren't even blink.
No, totally. And you think, what is this?
What's going to happen?
Happening? Yeah.
And by the time, I think by the sort of final act of the film, you are asked very much to suspend your disbelief entirely.
Oh yeah.
Like the things that it throws at you are so beyond what you expected for this film.
Yeah.
But you're so invested in the characters. You so want to see what happens that it didn't even occur to me how kind of outlandish some of these ideas were, and they really are, aren't they?
Oh yeah. But it's earned it by then.
It's totally
completely earned it. I believed everything happening.
Me too.
It was, and that really shows some power. Yeah. And I think it must be a relatively low budget movie, but it felt like it worked to its own constraints so well, considering it's quite ambitious in what it's doing. You know,
and it has that. There's a political element to it. I think it's it's about paranoia, it's about betrayal, it's about otherness.
I think The Girl with All the Gifts actually is an amazing comparison. I hadn't thought of it in the way that we don't quite know what's going on because we're so aligned with this little girl who has been very much kind of sheltered or shielded from the world, and then as she learns more, as this world opens out, it becomes apparent to us as to what's really going on. You know,
it does. It really does.
It's wonderful.
Yes, is that going to get a release?
I really hope so. I really hope so. I think it needs to. I mean, it feels like a blockbuster mainstream film in some way, so I'm really surprised it hasn't got a release yet.
There are films that have budgets 10 times the size of it.
Yes,
but it never ever seems a problem in this film.
Never.
What they seem to do, and I don't even know what the budget was, but what they seem to do is make whatever their budget was fit the world that they're building.
Yes, exactly.
It's never a problem.
No,
they don't try and overstretch themselves. They find really creative ways of dealing with any barriers that might exist.
Agreed.
And for me, I was never in any doubt as to the enormity of that world that they were building.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Stunning.
Absolutely loved it. That's Freaks. That's your number 2. Freaks, in no way a remake of the 1930s movie Freaks.
No.
Just to
totally
clarify.
Different.
Yeah, totally different. Brilliant. And on that note, we're going to hear from friend of the podcast, Rob Watts.
Hey Mike and Adam, it's Rob Watts here. Just to say that this year's Frightfest was one of the best social occasions I've had for a while, and obviously it was full of some amazing films. My top 3, personally, were Freaks. I know you guys loved it from Glasgow. I just thought, as a film about someone with superpowers, it was incredibly well written. I loved the ambiguity at the beginning, and I thought the central performance from Lexi Kolka was amazing. Then The Happy Face, it was confrontational. It was nothing like we expected. It forced us to address our own views of people with deformities and the way we indeed view ourselves. Personally, I think this was the one film that really affected me more than anything I've seen for a couple of years. So I'd highly recommend that. Not scary in any way, a really, really confrontational drama. And finally, Ready or Not, it was the funnest film, got the biggest cheers of the audience, and Samara Weaving was just brilliant in that lead role as well. Oh, and a shout out to Brandon Cronenberg's Please Speak Continuously and Describe Your Experiences as They Come to You. Quite a mouthful of a title, but a really, really intriguing premise, really well executed, absolutely stunning visually, and hopefully his new full-length feature, Possessor, will build on that because it was really incredible.
There we go, lovely Rob Watts.
Hello,
I felt
Rob.
like we were all very much like me, you, and Rob. We spent a lot of time together between us, didn't we? Because Rob was staying at my place through the whole 5 days, so we were kind of living together through Fright Fest. And then he was sat next to you for the whole weekend.
My seat buddy.
So he was our partner in crime, wasn't he?
We had the best time sitting. No, it was great. It was because I very briefly met Rob last year.
Yes.
And this year we were sort of stuck together, lumped together but we had the best time.
He's
so
a good
fun.
He's a good one, Rob.
A really strange thing happened, which is that we more or less agreed on everything we'd seen.
Right, yeah.
It was afterwards we sort of turned to each other and you give you a 2-second summary,
Yeah,
don't you?
yeah.
And we more or less agreed on everything.
Yeah,
which was odd, I thought.
Yeah, no, totally true. I really wish I'd seen more of the shorts. Actually,
Me too.
Heard a lot about a lot of really good short films, like that one Brandon Cronenberg short film that Rob just mentioned. I wish I'd seen that, but we didn't really get to see any, did we?
Didn't see any of the short films. No. I sort of wish they'd trail more of the main features with shorts. There are some that they do, but I'd love that. I understand why they have the showcases.
Yes,
I do. I totally understand that. But yeah, I really I love a good horror short.
Me too.
Honestly,
there's nothing better actually than a really good short, done short. So before I move on to my number 2, I'm also going to play another little snippet from another interview I did with a filmmaker. But first of all, here is a message from Kat Davis to introduce that film.
I'm Kat Davis. I'm a writer, director, producer, usually based in London, but currently in Croatia in recovery from Frightfest's 20th anniversary. My favourite film of the festival this year is a deliciously dark little Canadian film called Harpoon, which was tucked away in a Discovery screen. It's a fantastic film. It's a low-budget comedy horror, but it really doesn't look low-budget. They've made every penny stretch. It's beautifully shot. There's lots of twists and turns, and I can normally guess everything that's going to happen in a film, and I really couldn't with this one. It kept me guessing, and it was really surprising. It was an absolute barnstormer, and everyone in the screen was really enjoying it. Lots of big loud laughs. Really can't wait to get hold of this one on DVD. And it's got a fantastic narration from the guy who plays the husband-in-law in Fleabag, and he's absolutely cracking. It's brilliant. Check it out.
There you go. That's the brilliant Kat Davis. Kat Davis and her husband James Moran, they're both filmmakers, and they made the Switch Off Your Phone short film that we saw at the beginning of Fright Fest, which was fantastic.
Really fun.
Right? An absolute highlight of the festival for me. The narrator of Harpoon that she's talking about is the actor Brett Gelman. He's really, really funny. Harpoon is an interesting one. You didn't get a chance to see this, did you? It's a really interesting little three-hander. 3 people all on a boat. None of them trust each other. Who's going to live? Who's going to die? It's a great little, again, like one of those little plays almost. I sat down and had a very quick chat with the director, Rob Grant. You can hear the whole chat on Patreon, but here is a little snippet of my conversation with him. Hello, Rob. Hello.
Hello.
So, for people who don't know anything about this movie, tell me a little bit about it. Set the scene for me.
I'm going to keep repeating the pitch, but we always say it's Polanski's Knife in the Water by way of Seinfeld characters.
Nice.
And then if people don't know Knife in the Water, then Dead Calm. And if they don't know that boat movie, then they're in for a world of hurt when they watch it.
That's it. And like I said earlier, Wild Things. There's definitely a bit of Wild Things in there.
Yeah, that's right. Now I got to go watch that still. Yeah,
yeah, you've got it. Yeah. You only remember the swimming pool scene. That's the thing. But there's a final act that takes place on a yacht between 3 people. And I'm sure there's a harpoon gun as well.
I'm going to double check.
Yeah.
Spear gun.
All of these characters are quite brilliantly hateful. Was that intentional? I mean, like, I suppose, was there anyone that you wanted the audience to root for more than anyone else, or were they all sort of on par with each other?
They were all meant to have their distinct flaws.
Yeah.
I do hope, and the setup was, that who you hate for certain reasons is not who you hate by the end.
Yeah.
I hope that they were well-rounded enough that that perspective shifts as the movie goes.
Yeah.
And that was always the goal.
Excellent. You've got this really fun kind of narration as well. Talk me through a little bit about the decision to have that. Why the narration?
It was always meant to be there because I wanted the narrator to do all the backstory setup of these characters so that when they interacted, they didn't have to do this crappy expositional that close friends wouldn't have to do. They referenced things in a shorthand. So the only way I could find a way to achieve that was if I had the narrator say these things in a tongue-in-cheek way. I also thought it was a good way of setting up tonally the shifts that the movie was going to take.
Yeah.
And I used Magnolia is a great example of it. Like, that movie's got very serious...
That's right. That's got a similar sort of narration.
The movie's got very serious stuff, but then it's got frogs raining at the end.
Yeah.
And the narrator saying that things are a little bit off at the start, prepares you for those shifts.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah.
that was kind of our intention with it.
Yeah, interesting. It must be quite a challenge as a director to sort of tackle those tonal shifts, because it does go from quite funny, laugh out loud funny, to extreme horror at other times.
And people don't like that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, they want to know what they're getting into. This isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And so that's on us. We knew that, this is a big risk that we were taking, shifting. And originally in the narration, the narrator actually was trying to hit on themes way too on the nose. We were talking about how life can be a romantic comedy in 1 minute and then a horror movie the next.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but we pulled that way back because it was way too on the nose. But we just did try to make the movie emulate that these people think they're living one movie. They all think they're being the heroes of their story.
Yeah.
And then shit goes off the deep end.
How kind of medically or sort of scientifically accurate is it in terms of, like, did you look up sort of how long it might take for dehydration to kick in and all of that kind of thing?
From cannibalism at sea to superstitions to having two medical professionals tell us, because when we were showing the script, people were like 5 days. They wouldn't be that bad, and you're like, no, you're correct. Without food, without food, you can go like a month.
Yeah.
Without water, you're gone 5 to 7 days.
Yeah.
And most people didn't realize that. They're like, this is bullshit. I'm like, no, it's not. Go talk to
So
a doctor.
Is it true, this is not really, it's a minor spoiler, but is it true that you could survive from drinking seagull's blood or albatross blood or whatever that is?
That was taken from a survival story.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah. Another survival story used turtle's blood, like a sea turtle's blood. Like, here's the other thing. Whether it worked or not, we made sure that in the story that what came after could be attributed negatively to what they have done.
Could be an after effect.
I did research, like, you go crazy when you're not had enough food or water. One stranded group started drinking motor oil.
Wow.
Thinking that would sustain them. And it's very clearly that would cause more damage than...
Yeah.
But you go crazy, right?
Oh my God. How do you think you would cope, Rob, in that sort of situation?
Probably one of these three characters. Yeah. That's the cathartic experience, is I get to live out my shameful, non-heroic side through these characters. Because I often think, if I was in these situations, how would I act? And I'd like to think I'd be the hero, but, when my life is actually on the line, you don't know.
There we go, the brilliant Rob Grant. And if you get a chance to check out Harpoon, I would. It's really, really fun. I always like movies that are just, like little chamber pieces, 3 characters or less, or something like that. I love things like that.
If you do it well,
yeah,
I think it's great.
That's what I love about Frightfest, because they're movies that work to their own restrictions in terms of budget and everything else, and often they are the most imaginative and most creative, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and they often don't outstay their welcome as well. I would say there are a few films here and there in the festival, and I mean, come on, in general.
Oh, yeah.
Where you get to sort of the 70-minute mark, and you're a bit like, no, that's it.
I'm done now.
Yeah, that's it. The film is over. That's it. Let's stop. And then there's another sort of 20 minutes of whatever.
Yes.
But on the whole, I think chamber pieces are quite good at keeping those
keeping it down. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Okay, I'm going to move on to my number 2 then. This, for me, we talked about a lot of different movies, quite eclectic mix, and actually not a lot of really genuinely scary horror movies. This, for me, is my scariest movie probably of the festival, and this is Death of a Vlogger.
The video was live streamed, so once it was done, it was online, and people were scared.
Aaron convinced me to come back to investigate the ghost.
This alleged ghost that exists in his flat.
Why would someone do that?
I mean, I've seen a lot of paranormal activity in my time, right?
I mean, the bottom line is we need an expert.
I don't think there's anything more important in the paranormal world right now than getting to the bottom of what's happening in flats.
The fallout for Graham at that point, it was terrible. Like, he just became a different person.
Hashtag fucking fake news. You know what I mean? We're living in a post-truth world here.
Please stop. Please stop.
You didn't get a chance to see this, did you? Do you know, I'm so gutted. No one got to see it with me. I think it clashed with something else. And I was in a half-empty cinema watching Death of a Vlogger at, I think it was first thing in the morning, 10 a.m. in the morning. And it really terrified me. I loved it, absolutely loved it. So this is, and I know you would love this, Adam, because it felt similar to me to movies like Lake Mungo, where you're watching a faux documentary about somebody who may or may not, a vlogger who died, who may or may not have been killed by a ghost in their flat, and they may or may not have captured actual images of ghosts in their apartment. And it's one of those low-key movies where, and again, done by somebody very young, director Graham Hughes, he also stars in it, he is also the vlogger. He filmed the whole thing in his own flat in Glasgow, and it's one of those, where you kind of like, look at this shot, now let's zoom in, now if you look really closely and slow the image down, you can see somebody moving or you can see something happen. That to me is my favourite type of horror. I think Alex Ayling called it frame analysis horror. When we talked about Slender Man and Marble Hornets and all of that kind of thing.
Nice.
It also shares a real similarity to that. It feels very Marble Hornets-esque, but done in the age of vloggers and YouTubers and influencers and all the sort of stuff we get now, and this idea of, is this guy really haunted? Is he really in trouble, or is he doing it for hits, for viral, for views? And then what can happen if it is fake, and the backlash, the hate, the comments, the how much you can fall from grace as a celebrity now online if you pull a wrong move or if you do something wrong. And it stays kind of ambiguous all the way through. And it, instead of kind of hitting you with ghosts and mythology, it's hitting you with characters and what this guy is really about, and whether or not he's just doing everything he's doing for attention, or whether or not he's genuinely in trouble. And I won't say any more than that, but it's
amazing.
It's just great, and it's like, it is what it is. It's not Lake Mungo, but it's made by a young guy on his own in his flat with a couple of mates. And for what he did, I just think it's wonderful. And I really do think it was one of the scariest films I saw at the festival, in the classic horror sense, like in that creeping dread ghost story way. And I really wanted, like you said, sometimes you just feel so ready for a film like that. And I was so ready for this, and I wish more people had seen it.
Will it get released?
I really hope so. Yeah,
like a wide release. I really want to see it. As soon as you told me what it was about at the festival, I was so mad at myself.
I know. I told everyone, and everyone went, "Oh shit! I wish I'd seen this."
Yeah, there's a few like that, wasn't there, through the festival? I think Bliss was one that everybody was talking about. I didn't get to see Bliss.
Me neither.
But Death of a Vlogger, it's on my list now. So it's really, one way or another, I must see it.
It's really something, and I think maybe the title does it a disservice. I think a few people said I didn't like the sound of it from the title, Death of a Vlogger or something. But it really is. It's clever. It's really good.
I once saw a film at the Leeds Film Festival called Death of a Man in the Balkans.
Right.
And that, for some reason, it made me think about that. And that was described as a Serbian webcam farce.
Right. Okay.
So it's bizarre that there's
similar.
Yeah.
There you go. And it's got that element of it. Like Unfriended or those types of movies where you're seeing a lot of stuff through a webcam.
I like them though.
I like them as well. And it's not as full of jump scares as those movies. It's much more creepy and weird, and it's funny as well. It's actually very, very funny too, in the way that it takes the piss out of YouTubers and young people.
See it.
Yeah,
got to see it. Because Lake Mungo, you recommended Lake Mungo. Oh, actually, I think it was on your podcast that I heard about that, and then I watched it by myself, alone in the house with all the lights off and the doors closed and blah 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 blah, and it shot into my top 10 horror films
of all time.
Yeah, it's so good. So if it shares any of the DNA with that, I've got to see it.
You're all over it. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's absolutely worth a watch, and that's all I'll say about it, but keep an eye out for it. And if it ends up out there in some way, I mean, you don't even need to see this on a big screen. You could easily watch it on a laptop and it would still work, I think. That movie is called Death of a Vlogger. Okay, and that is my number 2. Okay, we're going to move straight on then to your number 1 film of Frightfest 2019. What was your number 1 pick?
My number 1 is Ready or Not.
Oh.
So, at midnight, you have to play a game.
Why?
It's just something we do when someone new joins the family.
A game. What game? Hide and seek? Are we really gonna play that?
Well, the rules are simple. You can hide anywhere. We then try to find you.
So there's no way for me to win, right?
I mean, stay hidden till dawn.
No, thank you.
Good luck.
What the hell is this? How old is this thing?
I know you're in here.
So good.
Oh my god!
It was. the reason I've put it at number 1, I said that the rest of the films in my list I think are more or less equal pegging, and below that are a load of others that quite easily could be in the top 5. The reason I put Ready or Not at number 1 is because I had the best time watching it. I had such fun. It was, I think it was it Sunday night? I forget. It got blurred into one.
I think it was the Sunday night film.
Sunday night big film, wasn't it? In the main screen. The atmosphere in the room was incredible because of the film. Like I think people are obviously excited to see this film with quite a lot of familiar names in and stuff. But for me, it really delivered. It was really funny. I should tell you what it's about actually. Before I start.
Yeah.
So it's about a woman called Grace who is marrying a man called Daniel, and he is a member of the super rich Le Domu family, and they're this huge. Kind of board game magnates almost, aren't they? They own this enormous board games company. And before Grace can be accepted into the family, she has to take part in an age-old family tradition of randomly selecting and then playing a game prior to beginning her life with her new husband. But one of the games that she can pick from will involve a bloody fight for survival. Guess which one she picks.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been a bit of a short film.
It really would. Yeah. And I think from the first exchange between Samara Weaving and Mark O'Brien, who plays her husband in this film, the groom. The tone is set immediately. It's really funny. And she is amazing in this. Absolutely amazing.
We've talked about some of the best performances of the weekend, and this is up there as well, isn't it?
I think that it's almost like a solo piece, and at the same time an ensemble piece is happening.
You're so right.
It's almost a film of two distinct parts that are happening side by side. She when she's on screen, she absolutely dominates everything.
She's magnetic, absolutely magnetic.
With the wrinkle of her nose, brought the house down.
Yes.
It was honestly, I just think it was so brilliant. And it's not a perfect film, of course it's not. It doesn't do very much other than what it sets out to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if I were to sit and analyse it and figure it out, there are problems with it. There must be. But I was sort of taking it as it was, which was just this fun, gory, fast-paced, thrilling horror thing.
I couldn't agree more. This is one of my favourites of the whole festival as well. Very similarly, I think, to Upgrade last year in the crowd reaction to it.
Absolutely.
People were absolutely
howling.
It was the most. It brought the house down, didn't it? At Frightfest, everyone was howling, cheering, laughing. It's also scary. It's also quite disturbing. You know, I think it's, again, to compare it to something recently, I'd say maybe Get Out, in the way that it is. It's got that social commentary. It's funny. It's also creepy in the ideas behind it. You've got this person trapped in this world, in this house, you know, but it's a bit sillier than Get Out.
It's a lot sillier, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's on similar, it's on similar sort of lines. I agree with everything you said. Really, I think Samara Weaving is just stunning.
I want to say, I want to show it to people. Like it's one of those where I want to get everyone round and stick it on because it's.
She, you know, again, it could have been a bit of a thankless role in some ways because all Samara Weaving's character really does is react to what's going on around her.
Yeah,
but she does it so unbelievably well. You know, she's just got perfect comic timing as well, and she's believable.
I think that character. I think there is a film where that character is just the constant victim all the way through. And to me, unless I'm sort of adding, unless I'm sort of misremembering it, it felt like she was in control quite a lot of the time. It felt like she was pissed off with what was going on, and furious rather than kind of just being the screaming victim.
Oh, totally. She's not at all really like a kind of like a slasher final girl or something. No. She's much more in control
and annoyed about it. She, a lot of the time she just looks pissed
livid
off. And when horrible things happen, she's just like, oh God.
There are lines, you know, she just goes fucking rich people and stuff like that. You know, it's really funny.
Yeah.
It's also got a great performance from Adam Brody, who is very good.
Andy McDowell's amazing in it.
it's beautifully mean-spirited. Like,
Yeah.
I love it. Doesn't let any of the rich characters off the hook.
No,
Let's
it
just put it
doesn't.
that way.
No,
and I loved that about
they're
it.
total ghouls, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you sort of get that, you sort of get that from the first time you meet them.
Yes.
Even when nothing particularly. I mean, there's one character, and I'm not going to ruin it because actually, as soon as you see this character, it's just comedy immediately. But yeah, I think and it could have descended into this lazy horror stereotypes, which I don't think it did. Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
Maybe
I don't
I'm
think
wrong.
it did. I don't think anything about it felt lazy. And I think, the way the story moves and what she does, she makes the smart moves to the point where I kept thinking, oh, she's going to escape or she's going to win. And then whatever happens. But it's wonderful. Now, this is a big mainstream movie, and it is getting a release on the 27th of September in UK cinemas wide.
I'll see it again at the cinema.
It's an 18 certificate, which I think is quite rare in this day and age. It doesn't hold back on the gore. I guess.
Feels a shame that it's an 18.
Right? Yeah, because teenagers, 15-year-olds would fucking love this movie. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It must just be the gore.
Yeah, there's some nasty bits.
There are some nasty bits.
A nail, and there's a few other bits that are really nasty, brilliantly nasty. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever see a film called Clue with Tim Curry?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it?
It's very Clue.
It's like Clue with gore.
It is exactly that.
I remember watching Clue, and I haven't seen it since then, but I must have been maybe 11 or something. I remember seeing it and just being open-mouthed with how funny it was. I mean, I don't, like I say, I'm not saying that this is I haven't seen it since then, so it might not be as good as I remember.
Yeah.
But I had a similar experience with this. I was just like, this is so funny. And anyway.
Couldn't agree more. So that's your number one then. That is the brilliant Ready or Not. Everyone can check that out in less than a month's time. So everyone go and see it. It's incredible. Before we get to my number one, we're just going to play a last few bunch of voicemails from various people with their picks of the festival.
Hi, my name's Matt Cartner. I'm from Swindon, and my favourite film from Frightfest was The Barge People. Directed by Charlie Steeds, this film is amazing. Full on canal carnage with crazy creature effects. British made, low budget, but it doesn't look low budget. Really good acting through and through, and also the poster art is absolutely astounding.
Hello, my name's Paul Mayers. I'm from Barton le Clay in Bedfordshire. My most memorable and favourite films from Frightfest was Ghost Killers vs Bloody Mary, with its amazing over-the-top gore and fantastic humour. It was reminiscent of Brain Dead or Evil Dead 2, which in themselves are fantastic films. And it also contained one of the most amazing scenes from Frightfest, which was the possession of a fetus in a jar, which danced around a table and proceeded to strangle someone with its umbilical cord. So yeah.
Hi, this is Paul from Edinburgh. My favourite film from Frightfest was The Dark Red, directed by Dan Bush. It's similar in ways to Soderbergh's Unsane, but it's better than that, and it has elements of Scanners and Rosemary's Babies thrown in. It's got a really good score and an amazing performance by April Billingsley in the lead role.
Greetings from Dulwich. Jason Reed here with my Frightfest film choice, and I'm picking Bliss. Now, at first, I wasn't too sure if I was liking this film, and about halfway through, it takes a curveball and goes much more into classic genre vampire horror territory, which made it, as Mike mentioned on a previous minisode, I came out and said it's a little like Near Dark on acid. It's got a great performance from Dora Madison, and it also has Norm from Cheers in it. So cheers, Evolution of Horror, and thank you everyone for the bliss that was Frightfest.
Hi there, Evolution of Horror. Vincent from Norwich here. Frightfest was an awesome experience. My first time going, but most certainly not my last. Highlights of the festival for me included Spiral, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Stairs and Dark Encounter. However, if you push me, Ready or Not was the highlight of the festival overall. It's a fantastic movie with a beautiful blend of horror and humour, shocks and suspense. Now, to be fair, plenty of other films provided this too, but Ready or Not was a major highlight because of the audience reactions. There were plenty of laughs and shrieks. There was also laughter. But best of all, there was applause. So I think that sums up what was best about Fright Fest for me. Great movies, but great people as well. So wonderful human encounters that I had, and I will certainly hope to see you all next year. Ready or not.
Okay, so that just leaves my number one then. My number one, I'm not a single person has mentioned it yet in any of their favourites, which kind of surprised me. Now, I saw this not at Fright Fest, but at a press screening with you, Adam, about a week before the festival, but this is Alexandre Aja's Cruel. So I don't know whether I wasn't in the Fright Fest screening, but a lot of people came out kind of saying they were a little bit disappointed, which really shocked me. And I know that this film isn't perfect, and there's probably other films like Happy Face on my list that I imagine are probably technically objectively better, but I can't deny that this movie scared me so much and made me so tense that it physically gave me a tension headache. You had a similar experience, didn't you?
Same experience.
And Rosie Fletcher, who also saw it in a press screening, she said she was so tense that at one point she jumped so much that she hit herself in the face. The guy next to you, Adam, you were actually worried about medically.
Honestly, he kept clutching at himself, like jumping. And at first I was like, oh, this makes it more fun. Like this guy's obviously quite scared by it. But then as time went on, I was like, he's in trouble. Like I honestly nearly leant across to ask him how he was, but then he seemed to be all right, so that's why I didn't do that. But he was honestly, I was worried for him at one point,
and that's it. Like, and I don't know whether maybe something was lost in the big Fright Fest screening, which really surprises me. But I could not believe how scared I was by a film about giant alligators. So this is essentially a really simple monster movie starring Kaya Scodelario, who basically is trapped in a house in Florida that is slowly filling up with water, and alligators have gotten in and she has to escape. And that's it. That's the premise,
more
right?
Or less it.
She has to, her and her dad have to escape a house filled with alligators. And it sounds so silly. And I'm really not a big fan of monster movies. Like, I get put off, actually, by movies that are about sharks or alligators or anything like that. It's not my favourite. But when they're done well, like you could count on about one hand, couldn't you, the movies like that I think are done really well. But this is one of them. I thought it was stunning.
I did.
Really, really scary. And that's all it is. I mean, the performance is brilliant, but really it's just a film that is just set out to scare you, I think. To put you on the edge of your seat for 90 minutes, make you jump, make you squirm, and that's what it did to me. And I can't deny its power. Like that is the only film where I felt myself, my heart racing, clutching my seat, almost wondering when is this going to end because I can't take it anymore. Kind of suspense.
It's really skillfully done, and when you see the alligators. And there's some really over the top, like almost gothic, well, not even almost gothic shots of them in lightning, and it's amazing. It's a really good, scary monster movie. And there is a subplot, to a certain extent.
There is.
And it's, again, interestingly, it's about a relationship between a dad and a daughter.
Of course it is, of course.
And their relationship when she was a child and now as she's an adult. But that, it doesn't try to get in the way. It doesn't try to foreground that. It's there the whole time. It's kind of creeping about in the subtext in terms of the the barriers between them, if you want to look that deeply into it. But ultimately, exactly what you just said, it's just this scary monster movie.
It just does exactly what it says on the tin, and I think it does it so well and so efficiently. I really loved it. Now I wonder whether it's got something to do with the big screen that it played on at Fright Fest. Because a lot of people said the CGI looked pretty bad. And again, it's not a big budget movie, and the CGI is a bit ropey at times, but maybe we saw it on a much smaller screen. Maybe that helped.
I didn't notice any of that stuff on the smaller screen that we saw.
It didn't take me out of it ever.
No.
I'm sure there is an element of that to it because it is a cheap film. But again, I think because the suspense is done so well, it didn't bother me actually if there were ever a few ropey bits of CGI.
And I quite like the creature design. Even if it was CGI, I thought it was, on the whole, I thought it was good. I thought it was scary. But actually, my experience in the Fright Fest screen wasn't as intense as it was in the smaller screen.
Exactly.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not
maybe that's the one movie that didn't play as well with a Fright Fest audience. It's very odd. I don't know why. I really don't know why. Because when we both saw it at that press screening, we said that's going to absolutely tear the roof down. In the way that Ready or Not did, I thought Crawl was going to do the same thing.
I agree. That's why I saw it again.
Yeah.
Like, what was it, 4 or 5 days later? I was like, I've got to see this with everybody
with
now.
Everyone, yeah.
And wasn't quite the reaction that I thought it was going to get.
So interesting. Somehow it was a bit diluted. But I think it was stunning. And like, I think, as much as I've got so much to say about all of the films, in some ways there's less to say about this movie. It just is what it is, but it's done so fucking well. I just thought it was really good, and I thought Kaya Scodelario was amazing in the lead role.
She is amazing.
And actually I got to sit down and chat to her and Alexandre Arger about making the film. So here's a little snippet of what they said about the experience of shooting this film. I absolutely loved this movie. Also, it scared the shit out of me as well. Kai, what was your initial reaction when you sort of read the script to this? And were you trepidatious about, this movie and what your character goes through in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was like, fuck, okay. Let me read it again and just focus on the character. And I was like, great, she's a strong, multi-dimensional woman. She's not getting her tits out. She's not kissing anyone. It's just her story. It's her journey. Brilliant. Love her, love her, love her. Then I reread it with the elements and putting myself in the situation. My son was 1 at the time, so I had that to consider and whether I'd physically be able to get through it. And I had like this tiny moment where I thought, I'm not going to be able to do it. And then that angered me so much that I was like, I'm doing this and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability because I don't ever want to feel like I can't take on a challenge. But I was fully aware that it was going to suck. And it sucked so much more than I expected.
Did it? I mean, it looked grueling because you're basically submerged underwater, sort of murky water for most of the film, right? Yeah. What were the biggest challenges for you, Alex, in directing and creating a movie like this?
There is so many of them, but we had to build 7 different tanks for each of the location to be floated. I mean, the idea of the movie is that ticking clock of the water coming up from the crawl space to the rooftop. So every set was a different tank. The quantity of water that goes from one to the other, the rain and the wind all the time, and basically like surviving a shoot like this for 40 days because Kaya's character is going through that nightmare just for 1 day in the story, but we had to shoot 40 days. So that was way longer, even without alligators.
So there you go. Like you can imagine, can't you, when watching it, what a horrible time Kaya must have had filming that.
It's because it's all in water.
Yes.
And I was just having like thoughts to myself about things like, when you're in the bath a bit too long and your fingers go wrinkly, but then it goes a little bit beyond that, and it's almost like, is my skin going to come off here? But,
totally.
So how did they protect against that?
I don't know exactly. And also just like little things, like she said, she was so used to on any other set. You hang out between takes with your fellow actors and chat, but 90% of the time it was her on her own, and so she'd be the only actor waiting around in water while everyone else was doing their tech stuff, and she had no one to talk to. She couldn't hold her phone because she was underwater most of the time. She's just hanging out in swampy, smelly water. She had a dog to keep her company.
The dog,
a brilliant dog performance.
Plays a blinder in that
vital
film,
role, almost as vital as the alligators. And Alexandre Arger, who is somebody who I'm sure you know because you've sort of written a lot about movies from the sort of those kind of torture porny.
So when I did my masters, that was my final year. My final dissertation piece was on torture porn and post 9/11.
Right, post 9/11 cinema.
Really.
And whether or not his movies are strictly torture porn, but he did Switchblade Romance, Haute Tension. He also directed the Hills Have Eyes remake. So he was definitely part of that movement, wasn't he, at the time?
What was it, the Splat Pack?
The Splat Pack, exactly, I think he's very good, I think he's very good at directing. And I think this movie shows that he's not just good at doing that kind of really hard-hitting extreme stuff. He's also just very good at classic old-fashioned suspense, because this movie's got bags of that.
Yeah, and I think he understands shock and tension and the power of a well-timed scare.
Exactly.
Sound design to bring that up again is bang on this. There's something about there's a particular shot that I'm thinking of, which is a surprise shot, so I won't say any more than that, but it's early in the film, and it's so effective and so scary. And I think if you were to, you'd have to watch it 5 or 6 times to figure out exactly why it is so scary. And I think it's directors like that that make the difference, because in the hands of a different director you could have exactly the same setup, exactly the same effects and CGI and everything, same actor, but something about the combination of those things wouldn't
land.
It wouldn't land.
Yeah, you're so right, and that's the thing. He clearly is just a very accomplished director at his craft.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's the thing again. Going back to it, as simple as this movie is, it's just so tightly and well directed, in my opinion, that it's the best move. It's the best horror movie I saw at the festival. I would say, not that I even saw it at the festival, but it's the best horror movie of the bunch
that was on offer. Yeah,
exactly. So there you go. So those are our top 5. Adam, run down your top 5 again one more time for us.
So at number 5 is Kindred Spirits. 4, Knives and Skin. Number 3 is The Wretched. Number 2 is Freaks, and number 1 is Ready or Not.
Lovely, what a selection. And for me, number 5, Daniel Isn't Real. Number 4, Happy Face. Number 3, A Good Woman Is Hard to Find. Number 2, Death of a Vlogger. And number 1, Cruel. Some real gems this year. And actually, there are so many that neither of us could even include on our lists. Are there any sort of honourable mentions for you that you want to mention before we wrap up?
Loads of them. Come to Daddy was the first film of the festival.
Opening night film starring Elijah Wood and our friend Grant Mazzy from Pontypool. What's his name again? Stephen Mahattie. Amazing. I could watch him in anything. I could watch him read the phone book. He's wonderful.
He's so great.
Come to Daddy was a great movie. Again, one of those where I had no idea what it was or where it was going. The setup didn't really give me any clues.
No.
It was a great little mystery. I loved it.
It was. Mary, I loved, with Gary Oldman, which is a haunted boat.
Yes, somebody described it to me as The Conjuring on a boat. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's better than that.
But, great.
It's a really tight ghost story with rules, which I like. I like it when we set up rules and ghost stories and follow those rules.
Agreed.
It stood out for me as a lovely little chiller.
Lovely. For me, one of the big ones I want to mention, which originally was in my top 5, and then I thought I want to create more room for smaller films and smaller filmmakers, but Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the Guillermo del Toro, I really, really loved. And again, not a lot of people liked this as much as I thought they would, or as much as I did, but I loved it. It was unashamedly what it was. It was almost a horror movie for kids. It feels very PG-13. It is like a kind of storybook brought to life, and there are in the same way that you get with things like Pan's Labyrinth, it's a kid's story but told in quite an adult way with some brilliant creature designs
and the scares
monsters.
The scares are scary.
The scares land, and it's a little bit formulaic in the way the story is told, and it's a little bit episodic, isn't it? I almost wonder if it would have been better as as a portmanteau, as opposed to trying to connect the stories together.
I felt exactly the same. I've got the original collection of stories, and actually they are very simple. They're very simple, those stories. So I felt the same. I wonder whether the issue was that the stories just don't have the depth. Maybe that's what it is.
But do you know what? 14-year-old me would have thought this was the best fucking film I've ever seen. Like I'm so excited to introduce this film to, for example, I've got a 13-year-old nephew, and I think what a wonderful kind of gateway into horror that film is. It's so good, it's so scary, it's so imaginative.
It is.
And there are certain set pieces, like there's one in a red corridor, which really is like nothing I've seen before. It's very weird and very creepy. I loved that. I think, maybe it wasn't, again, a great film for a 11 p.m. Frightfest audience.
I think you're right.
It's aimed at a much younger demographic, but I think if you give it a chance, I think it's wonderful. I loved it. It's got tons of heart as well. It's great. I really, really loved.
Good performances too.
Great performances. That's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Anything else you want to mention?
Feedback.
Yes,
I thought was a pretty effective thing. I also think it's another film I want to watch again, because I also think it's saying something more than I initially thought it was. There's a little quote, and it's a blink and you miss it in the background of the film, where it talks about tyranny being the absence of nuance. And it's a little quote, I think, that Eddie Marsan's character says on the air, which you can pick it out of the sound design, but I don't think it's an over part of the dialogue. And I actually think that is largely what the film's about.
Agreed.
There are some horrendous things that happen. There are some horrendous characters.
should say it's a kind of small chamber piece movie, isn't it? It stars Eddie Marsan, and it all takes place in a radio station.
Yes.
It's similarly to Pontypool, which we've
Exactly.
discussed on the podcast. It's got that vibe, small, but it's nasty. I mean, it's
really
a
nasty,
mean-spirited film in a good way, I think, and it has got a lot to say about everything, a lot of things right now happening in the world right now, and Eddie Marsan he can never not be good, I think.
And Arthur from Peaky Blinders.
Yes, exactly. And you've mentioned a few times in other films sound design. I think this movie uses sound design to an incredible,
beautifully,
an incredible extent. There are tricks that it pulls with kind of soundproof walls and soundproof rooms, and obviously radio stations, and whether or not they're on air, whether or not they're being heard, or whether they're not being heard. I think it's a very simple story that is very well directed. It's been directed the shit out of, and I loved it. Yeah.
And without revealing anything, the ending, I think I understand why that might have upset some people, and I actually was a bit like, it gave me a bit too much, actually, particularly a film which seems to be saying that it's about nuance, it's about things not being black and white, about people having all sorts of elements to their character, even if ostensibly they do monstrous things and behave monstrously. I thought it was really interesting, and I think I want to have another look at it.
Me too. I think it's one that stayed with me, definitely. Two movies that I think you could put along the same lines, I think made by the same producers, the Banana Splits movie and Critters. You saw Critters, right?
I loved Critters.
What a silly movie.
Oh, I loved it.
But you know what you're getting.
I grew up with... I think Critters was... Critters 2, I think, was one of the very, very first horror films I ever saw.
Right.
And I think I don't... At that age, I didn't even detect that there was any comedy to it.
No, totally. You don't when you're younger, do you? I had that with Child's Play with Chucky as well. You don't realise how funny it is until you're older. And
I think I told you really early doors that it was the one film that I was going to be...
you were excited about that from the start.
I was going to have a tantrum if I didn't get tickets to it. So I was delighted to get tickets to it. It's ridiculous, and it's also... the lead characters are fantastic.
Great.
And it's an interesting, diverse cast.
It is, actually, yeah.
And they're all doing interesting things. They all have stuff to do.
Yeah.
They've all got their own stuff going on. They've all got their own agendas within the piece.
Yeah.
But it's also this daft film about little furry aliens that bite you.
And none of them are CGI. They're all practical and puppets.
They're all practical,
which I loved.
yeah.
And along very similar lines, the Banana Splits movie. Very similar. A really interesting, diverse cast, good characters. With both movies, I would say, I wanted them to be a little bit nastier.
Agreed.
I really wish, because the point of them is that they're kind of cute and funny, I wanted them to push the bad taste and the nastiness and the gore more with both of them.
Yeah.
But both of them are really fun. I mean, Banana Splits, whoever came up with the idea to turn that into a horror movie is a genius, and they did a really good job of it. It's one of the most bonkers things I saw at Frightfest. I loved it. I want to do a little shout out as well. Not to the film wasn't particularly brilliant, but there is one moment in the film Porno, which we went to see, a classic kind of very silly late night schlocky movie.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favourite gore moments in the whole festival, involving testicles. Testicles being removed and then kind of sewn back on. It was really something, wasn't it?
It returned to that shot about 5 times too many, but the more times it did, the funnier it was. And actually, I thought in a minute they're going to cut away from this, and we're not going to. It just kept cutting back,
giving it to you.
Yeah, it did.
And it was almost like the whole film was built around that one moment.
Yeah,
I kind of didn't really care about anything else going on, but that one moment of gore made it worth the watch.
I quite like the humour in it. I thought there was some. I quite like this when you get these very straight-laced characters.
Yes.
I like films that use the word heck a lot. And I think he kept calling him a dingleberry or something like that. And for some reason, it really tickles me when I see that avoiding of cursing by using like really innocent words.
Agreed.
But that scene was.
It was a standout moment. Standout moment of gore for the festival for me. Anything else you want to mention?
So I'll Take Your Dead.
Yes, what a film!
Was an astonishing thing.
We were both keen to see this because I know Kim Newman tweeted saying it was probably his favourite genre movie of the whole year. So I was really excited to watch it, and it is really interesting. Again, a kind of interesting family dynamic at the centre of it,
families.
right? More families, interesting, quirky, weird, creepy.
Big-hearted.
big-hearted. Yeah, really liked it. Really
Shared
liked
something
it.
with Tigers from last year. Tigers Are Not Afraid. Maybe not necessarily in its in what the story is, but there was something about the incidental horror.
Yes,
like the horror is not the most important part of it, and actually up to a certain point in that film, you could lift the horror out, and it would still be as effective.
Yes.
Not to say again that the horror wasn't brilliant and well executed.
Yeah.
It was a surprising thing.
Yeah, really surprising, really, really good.
Great performances again.
Great performances.
And the girl that's in I'll Take You Dead, who's one of the two central roles, is also in Critters. Ava Preston.
Ava Preston. She did a great job. Actually, it was interesting to see how many actors popped up in several films across the weekend. There was a lot of that.
Stephen Mahaty, as you said, was in a couple. It's always good to see Stephen Mahaty.
Always a pleasure. I mean, we could go on and on probably, but we should wrap this up. It was overall an incredible standard of films, and you know, it's just that constant pain of like, there's always going to be things we're not going to see. I know Jason mentioned it, and a lot of people mentioned Bliss being one of their favourites, a kind of LSD vampire trip, Gaspar Noé-esque, and it sounds amazing. Neither of us got the chance to see it. I know that was a lot of people's favourites. You know, there are so many. Brad mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again. I Trapped the Devil. Incredible. Really, really great. We could go on and on forever.
On and on.
Yeah, it really is something.
So many hits.
Yeah.
So many hits.
Yeah, loved it. So will you be returning to Frightfest next year?
Nah. Yeah, no, I'll be back. Absolutely, no question.
Can't wait.
I actually can't wait.
Yeah.
When I was getting tickets this year, and it was quite difficult. There was some website issues.
Yes.
The thought that I might not get a ticket suddenly made me realise how much I wanted to go. And I've only been once before, so I sort of can't wait now till next year. It's a long 12 months.
Totally, it's a long 12 months. We'll get there. Can't wait. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining me.
So
for
welcome.
This. It's been so much fun. Where can people find you out there in the world if they want to come find you?
I am on Twitter, Adam_Z, that's Z-E-D, so Adam @Adam_Z.
Yep.
My theatre company, The Book of Darkness and Light, we're on Facebook, so if you just search The Book of Darkness and Light, but you can also find us at our website, which is thebookofdarknessandlight.com. I think that's probably the best places to find me.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there we go. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a big thank you to my brilliant co-host Adam Robinson, and a huge thank you to all of the other brilliant guests and listeners who sent in their voice messages and contributed to this week's episode. What a treat to hear from all of you. Well, there was a lot of titles there that we went through. If you attended Frightfest this year and you didn't get in touch with us already, please do write in. What was your favourite movie of Frightfest 2019? And equally, if you didn't get a chance to go to the festival this year, what are you most looking forward to based on those recommendations? Which movies have really piqued your interest? I would love to hear from you guys. Please do get in touch. Don't forget, the email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on all the other social media platforms. And if you want to check out previous episodes and previous seasons of this podcast, simply go to our website, evolutionofhorror.com. You can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Acast, Libsyn, and various others. And if you get a chance, please do subscribe to us. Please do rate and review us. It really helps make a difference. It helps us get discovered by new listeners, and therefore gives the podcast a little boost up the charts, which always helps us. So please do get involved. And that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. Join us again very soon for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.